the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Authentic Audio Productions, providing a personalized full-service audio solution for your company, no matter how big or small. From show hosting to custom content creation to professional recording tools and services, Authentic Audio is your one-stop shop for all your audio needs. Elevate your podcast today to the next level by visiting AuthenticAudioPro.com. That's AuthenticAudioPro.com. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Monday, May 6th. Plenty of NFL news to get to today. We're going to focus on that mostly. Going to start quickly with a wrap around the top cash teams in professional sports over the last calendar year, because it's kind of a topic, at least in my small little inner circle. The Vegas Golden Knights are in a Game 7 kind of fight for their life here against the Dallas Stars after a 51-22 regular season. Look, it's kind of becoming a thing where these top teams, in terms of cash spending, don't exactly turn big off seasons into the finish line. And I'm just kind of doing a buyer beware mantra here for if your NFL team was just uberly aggressive, and then maybe that's not all in one place, right? So maybe you had a gigantic free agency, Carolina, but maybe we're a little bit more level-headed with your draft solutions or UDFA signings. But if you feel like your team just ran the gamut, I can tell you right now, the last decade or so of financial trends are not in your favor. They're just not. And especially if one team specifically tries to cram everything together into one off season. Generally speaking, that is the recipe for disaster. Not necessarily going to miss the playoffs, not necessarily going to make so many mistakes that it sets your franchise back for years and years and years, though we've seen those examples, that's for damn sure. But generally speaking, if the conversation with your team right now, if we're talking NFL, is, man, this team is all in, it's probably not a good idea to put your hard-earned money on them winning the championship. Let's just say that out loud, okay? So I mentioned at the NHL, Vegas and Colorado are basically neck and neck with how they spent their 2023-24 campaigns. Both are super solid teams, 51-win regular season teams. All right. The next three, you could say, are fairly disappointing in Vancouver, St. Louis, and Tampa Bay, with Tampa Bay kind of being the loudest one here. Florida, I would put them at the top of this list in terms of where the playoffs are right now. Sixth highest cash earning team. Generally speaking, if you've listened to this podcast for a while, you know where I'm going with this. You want to be in the middle of the road. And in terms of this particular past season, the middle of the road team from a cash standpoint, Boston and New York, the Rangers, that is. Edmonton's in this conversation, so I'm not going to leave them completely out. Winnipeg, Dallas, kind of in this conversation. But Boston and New York, I think, two very polarizing teams right now, very much following the trends of spent a lot, dialed it back, and let those things kind of marinate in the dish, in the crock pot, might be ready to take it to the finish line. So if you're looking for some late playoff money, that's generally how I throw my conversations together here. 2023 baseball season, right? We all know the collapse of the Mets, $370 million worth of cash last year to go absolutely nowhere. Texas was seventh, the team that eventually got to the finish line. And we had plenty of examples of teams in the middle of the road, including the runner-up, Arizona, 21st in cash spending last year. What about basketball? Maybe the real reason I started this conversation in the first place, at least in my own head. Here's your top 5 cash spenders for the past regular season. Golden State, Clippers, Suns, Bucks, Nuggets. I don't think I need to say anything else with that. Okay. It's a lot of old money that is just not paying off anymore. And whether or not those teams decide to start over and rip things up and make massive trades, we shall see. Generally speaking, with the NBA, they're just willing to pay to be relevant. And relevancy doesn't necessarily mean winning a title. It's just how the league operates right now. Now, Denver, 5th, Boston, 6th, different conversations. But, if we're rounding out the top 10, the teams that are left are way below that. All right. Golden State, the Clippers, the Suns, the Bucks, Denver's in, Boston's in, Miami's out, Philly's out, Pelicans out, Lakers out. There's your top 10. There's 2 left. Okay. Dallas still hanging around, 11th. Cleveland barely hanging around, 12th. So as we get towards that middle, and by the way, guess who's dead center in 2023-24 cash spending? Your Minnesota Timberwolves. This stuff isn't, it's not rocket science. They did a lot of work last offseason with Rudy Gobert and extending some of their players just because they had to. But the timing isn't an accident. All right. By the time these rookies get to the point of where they are extension worthy, even though they're 22, 23 years old in this case, they're experienced. So yeah, they're making a hell of a lot of money. And you offset that with exception contracts and minimum veterans contracts. But Minnesota's top 5 is one of the most expensive starting lineups in all of basketball. And as a whole, that roster is fairly cash balanced out, 15th in the league. Money is on their side right now. All right. So let's look at 2024's NFL teams. Just for now, it's way too early to do this. But because we're having the multi-sport conversation, we can at least wet our beaks a little bit with where teams are headed. Cleveland and Philadelphia are kind of neck and neck at that 1-2 spot right now. Now, this is the 90-man roster, of course. So plenty of players will fall off for one reason or another. Most of them on minimum salaries that won't impact this conversation too much. And by the way, we're talking a $50 million difference between Cleveland and Philadelphia and the next tier, which is San Francisco, Houston, Atlanta, Kansas City. Okay. So these 2 organizations, Cleveland and Philly, are leaps and bounds ahead in terms of cash spending. And a lot of that has to do with extensions, acquisitions and immediate extensions. And we've talked about Philadelphia's contracts really the past couple of podcasts because they're relevant. They're big. They're record setting, they're market resetting, et cetera, et cetera. So no surprise that these are the organizations there. But again, buyer beware. That's all I'm saying. All right. Philly looks great on paper. Cleveland has looked great on paper for a bunch of years. Cleveland kind of limped themselves into the postseason with Joe Flacco, and the Eagles completely imploded down the stretch last year. So could we see a bit of a bounce back with those 2 organizations? Sure. Let's just get it out there. The teams right now sitting in the middle of this thing that I think are at least in the conversation for wild card division, etc. Miami, the Jets, maybe if Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. Chicago, maybe. New Orleans, I don't know. They baffle me every year. Somehow they remain division relevant every year. I'm not going to write them off. That's for darn sure. And then Seattle, a really nice roster with a Geno Smith question mark. So those are the teams I'm looking at right now. You want to get a little bit more expensive, and teams I'm certainly looking at that have certainly this offseason alone, if not the past couple off seasons, have really pushed. Cincinnati's obviously one of them, and T. Higgins franchise tag is one of the reasons that Cincinnati is 12th right now and not 14th, and right dead in the middle of this conversation we're trying to have here. So they're in there. Miami's in there. Indianapolis is in that conversation. One of the more notable teams this past offseason, both from a draft and a free agency and a trade standpoint. And they might not be done, by the way. So that's where we stand right now. Way too early. May 5th and 6th. 90-man rosters still kind of coming together, let alone tearing apart as we get down to 53, 55. But look, it's another year of all of these major sports kind of going through this top-heavy situation from a talent standpoint, and the team that ends up getting to the finish line, or maybe the teams that get to the finish line, being nowhere near the top of the food chain in terms of financials. Middle of the road seems to pay out the most dividends. And we'll certainly see over the next few months if the NFL streak continues in that regard. Let's stick with football. May 2nd was the deadline for 5th-year options for 2021 first-round draft picks. Obviously, those decisions are all now completely in and on the books. There's a piece on SpotTrack.com just basically quickly going over some of the notable notes with that, and a big, long 32-man table giving you every single result that happened. Couple players that weren't eligible at all. Let's get those off the top here. Alex Leatherwood has been released out of his contract. Just one of those. One of the many, unfortunately, Raiders first-round draft pick busts. He tried to bounce around a little bit, and he's already inactive right now in the league. So I don't think there's any sort of coming back from this career, but you never know. Offensive linemen have been a bit of a dime in a dozen situation. We'll see if that's the case for Alex Leatherwood in the coming months and years, I guess. Rashad Bateman actually was not 5th-year option eligible. He missed training camp. He missed the deadline to attend training camp, which unfortunately did not accrue him a full season in 2023, which means he was not eligible for that 5th year because he was still a 4th-year player according to service time for the NFLPA. Didn't matter. The Ravens did right by him and tacked on 2 years, a nice little 2-year, almost $13 million extension. Those numbers are now in on SpotTrack. It really doesn't do much more in terms of stability, and maybe there's a little bit more cash in his hand at this point in time, but really it's just a 1-year deal with him now being under term. And that's obviously the most important part of this is Rashad Bateman is now under term for the next couple of seasons with the Ravens. And that's all I can say about that. It's not exactly the Jordan Love type situation where Baltimore is looking for value here. They've done a hell of a lot of work on their receiving corps over the past couple of seasons to make sure that Lamar Jackson has the weapons he needs. Bateman's been a brighter spotlight in that regard, but I wouldn't say he's a standout or even a necessity going forward here. All right. For those that were actually eligible, we had 18 players, including Bateman, that pushed to the finish line, got the exercise 5th-year option. All right. 3 of these players have extended. I mentioned Bateman as one. Penei Sewell, we've talked about that contract. Exercised and then extended in Detroit. And the same goes for Devontae Smith in Philadelphia. Exercised and extended another 3 years, $75 million in Philadelphia, immediately before they announced A.J. Brown's historic extension alongside him in Philadelphia. 18 exercised options, 12 complete declines. It's kind of the going rate. One of the notes I pull out of this thing, which I thought was rather interesting. This is the 2nd straight season that the number 2 and number 3 pick from this respective draft have had their options declined, right? It was Chase Young and Jeff Okudua last year, and it's Zach Wilson and Trey Lance this year. It means nothing, except it's pretty remarkable, right? That of all this work that gets done and all this mock drafting and all this scouting and all this back and forth and left and right and up and down and take the best available player, that 2 of the top 3 draft picks in back-to-back seasons, 2020 and 2021, have gotten to a point where taking the value salary on that 5th year has not been worth their respective team's time. That's pretty remarkable. Probably an anomaly, and we'll see where we go from here. But to only have 3 players extended is not great for starters. Certainly, we've got some extensions coming up here, and we're going to get to that at the back end of this show. But it's not the most glamorous draft class that we've had. Let's put it that way. And honestly, it's trending toward one of the worst of the decade, and especially in terms of the quarterbacks. And that's been well documented. But I'll say it again: we had 5 quarterbacks go in the first round in 2021. Not only did 4 of them not get 5th-year options, all 4 of those players have already been traded. Okay, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Mac Jones. All traded, all declined on their 5th-year option. only Trevor Lawrence, whose $25.6 million option was officially exercised and probably turns into a multi-year extension here in the coming weeks or months. Only Trevor Lawrence, the number 1 overall pick, stands as a likely franchise option, at least for the next couple of seasons with the respective draft team. Everybody else has completely flopped out here in one way or another. That's not the case for the wide receiver bunch, which was in order: Jamar Chase, soon to be extended; Jalen Waddle, I think, soon to be extended; Devontae Smith, already extended; Kadarius Toney's a bit of a black mark on this one; and then Rashad Bateman, as we mentioned, who wasn't eligible for that 5th year, but still got a nice little extension to keep him around in Baltimore as a viable weapon. Nice class in that regard. Here's the story that I think is getting the most legs. Travis Etienne was exercised at $6.1 million in Jacksonville, and boy, he had some injury issues to go along with this, at least start to his career. But Jacksonville's kind of having a moment right now where they don't want to give up on the last couple of seasons that they were really kind of ramping up toward, even though last year kind of felt like a flatline. But they're going to keep Lawrence in tow. They're going to keep Etienne in tow, right? They're bringing in other weapons. They're spending money. They're acquiring players. They're doing everything that a wannabe contender should be doing. And exercising this 5th-year option, to me, goes along with that. This is not a team that in any regard is looking to dial it back. Was this too aggressive? We'll see. If Etienne gets hurt this year and he's not the 1,500 yards from scrimmage player that he has shown he can be at times here. And by the way, it was 1,500 and change last year. It was 1,400 and change in 2022. Now they got nothing before that, as you probably know, especially if you had him in a fantasy roster. But it's been back-to-back good, solid, gradually increasing productivity-wise years. I don't know that I would have guaranteed even $6.1 million, which I know sounds ridiculous, because if he's the player that he has shown to be over the past 18 months, he's worth double that on a multi-year extension to somebody, right? Maybe not to Jacksonville, but to somebody. But just like Pittsburgh showed us with Najee Harris, a player who has been maybe not as productive, but healthier and may have a higher ceiling when it's all said and done. Pittsburgh really didn't even think twice about declining Najee Harris option, which was a little bit more expensive at $6.7 million. But they're showing us that they want to have control over the situation. Yes, Jaylen Warren is under contract through 2025. There's going to be another rookie to come in and subsidize that situation. But Pittsburgh's going to have to add a running back in some regard after 2024. Their mindset is, we would rather have control of all the options than have a $6.8 million fully guaranteed salary on our books that we may have to do something about. I agree with them. And I hate this for the position, right? Because that salary should be a no-brainer for a player who plays a position that can impact not just 1 or 2 games, but multiple games across a 17-week schedule. But I think I'm siding with Pittsburgh here. Now, is it a little bit easier for Pittsburgh to handle this because Warren has shown that at any point in time he's probably ready to take over RB1? Probably, but you only have him for 1 more year as well, through 25. So what they're saying out loud is, we would rather go back to the draft, go back to free agency, try to hit lightning in a bottle with the UDFA, than have anything to do with $6.8 million fully guaranteed next year. We'll take our chances. I'm guessing this is the way most, if not all, GMs are thinking. And for Jacksonville not to be thinking this way with Travis Etienne $6.1 million, you can call it reckless, you can call it risky, or you can call it, this is just the window that they're in. This is the mindset that they have right now, which is that player's too damn good to even think about trying to replace for 1 more season. Let's overpay him if it comes to that. And if it doesn't, and he's healthy for 18 weeks, and we sneak into the postseason in back-to-back years, right? Because this is about 2025 we're talking about with this salary, not 2024. So All he's got to do is make us look like, not look like chumps for the next 2 seasons. And if he does, is it really that much skin off our back? No, it's not. And that's the point I want to say here, right? Travis Etienne at 6.1 next year and 2.4 this year for a total of 8.5 and change isn't going to alter the makeup of the Jacksonville Jaguars roster construction process. It's just not, right? And he's a talented player who can catch balls out of the backfield, who certainly has some kind of gravitas with Trevor Lawrence. And, because of the injuries, it doesn't have the mileage that some of these other players have. Now we can look at it as injury prone, or we can look at it as he's had a couple of years off to rehab himself into full health. And where some players may fall off a cliff at 27, 28, Etienne may be just entering his prime right now. And if we can get that prime for $8.5 million over the next 2 seasons, maybe we're not so stupid and crazy. It's a toss-up. And like I said, the majority of GMs are going to take the Najee Harris position right now. But I'm not going to kill Jacksonville for what they've done here, even though my guess is some people are out there doing that right now because of the absolute decline of the running back situation and where things are headed. A couple more things. I'm shocked, truly shocked. This is going to surprise some people. I'm shocked that Kyle Pitts had his 5th-year option exercised. It's less than $11 million. I know where the tight end market is now. It's at $17 million, barely. And that's Travis Kelce getting a pay raise for 1 season. I just don't think he needed to do that. And I'm rolling the Kyle Pitts decision into this Michael Penix Jr., Kirk Cousins, et cetera, situation. At some point in time, Atlanta needs to become a more balanced team. And that time should have been this offseason. And I don't think they're the favorite in the division. I don't think Kirk Cousins makes them the favorite in the division. But had you added Kirk Cousins at whatever cost, whatever it took to upgrade from Desmond Ridder, right? Nobody was killing the Kirk Cousins contract before we had the Michael Penix Jr. selection. And now we look at both things and say, wait, are either of these intelligent, right? It got us thinking all backwards about this franchise because now we don't trust their decision-making. This is a team that was putting up fairly decent offensive production with Desmond freaking Ridder and Taylor Heineke. Okay. And everybody out loud was saying, if this team just acquires some semblance of a defense, whether it's a pass rush to go with AJ Terrell and some of the defensive backs that have worked out, certainly Jesse Bates last year, if they can just continue to pump some assets into their defense and balance things out a little bit, this could be an actual NFC contender. And they spent all offseason doing the exact opposite. And Kyle Pitts is just another example of we are thinking completely on one side of the ball, not even just for this year, but now for next year. And that just reinforces the Penix Jr. conversation, right? They are saying out loud to us, and they're trying to blame the owner, right? We have his sign off. He knows that what this thing is all about. They are telling us out loud that it is not just about right now, that we are thinking about life after Kirk Cousins already. And the decisions that are being made right now are being made for 2.5 years down the line. And I'm telling you right now, after having the opening I just had, which is, if you're thinking about then, you're never going to get to then. It takes an incredible amount of presence, and by the way, money, and maybe a little bit of luck, maybe a lot of bit of luck, to turn things around in one off season, let them marinate, and then get to a point where the work you've done can graduate to a point of being able to outlive a full season and then a full second season, which is the playoffs. It's a little bit easier to do in the NFL, in my opinion, right? The NBA, the NHL, certainly Major League Baseball, they're marathons. Okay, you were building multiple rosters within one season just to get through Major League Baseball because of the injuries and the wear and tear. And It's everything that goes into that. It's a little bit more singular in the NFL. But I believe that the decision-making that has come forward in Atlanta has set them back years. The exact opposite of what they're telling us that they're trying to do, which is set themselves up for years. That to me is what the decisions on paper look like. Not only are you screwing right now, you're not maximizing your chances today. You're actually backing into a situation that's going to make it worse when it comes time for Michael Penix Jr. And all you have to do is look at some of the contracts on the books right now. They're not going to be here forever. Most of them won't even be here after this upcoming season. Okay, if you've been following this league and certainly following what we do to cover this league, I have to fight to keep players off of bubble rosters in December. I could give you 30% of every team if I absolutely wanted to. And teams like Buffalo this year and New Orleans this year showed me that that's an actual possibility at times. Those massive purges can happen and will happen when teams have to do it. Those are good teams that decided to take an absolute axe to their current contract structure in order to preserve their ability to continue to grow and blossom. It's like pruning a tree. It feels like you're taking too much off the branch, but really all you're doing is setting itself up to grow back quicker and hopefully more flowerful and prosperly. That's the risk you take, especially when you have a quarterback contract. Atlanta got a quarterback contract an hour and a half ago, and they're acting like they've had it on the books for 3 years, and it's been hampering their roster construction. And so much to the point that a minute after they signed that contract, they decided we better get a rookie quarterback under contract so that we can have value at some point over the next 3 years. That's insanity. That's absolute insanity. That is crazy people saying crazy things out loud. And again, they think that they're going to be able to win now and then continue to win with the next iteration that they've already created. And that just is not how the game works this year. It doesn't happen that way anymore. All right. Go all in. Give it a minute to grow. Find the exact right time to push the button to say we're going now. And that's with trade deadline. That's with everything, right? And then slowly start to tear some pieces down. And eventually you'll be ready again for another quarterback. But to think that everything they have in place right now is just going to nicely transfer into the Michael Penix Jr. era is literally crazy. It's literally crazy. If it was that easy, the Patriots would be AFC East favorites this year and for the past couple of seasons. Because what other team knew their element, knew their structure, knew their scheme better than them? It's not that easy. Okay? It's just not that easy. They didn't know what the hell to do after their quarterback. Most teams don't. Atlanta, by the way, a team that has not had any kind of success with quarterbacks outside of Matt Ryan, and I know there's a lot of people are arguing his career out loud right now as well. They think they can do 2 for 1. And I'm here to tell you they probably went over 2. Extensions. I've got a piece on Spotrac.com that has 10 notable players. You've heard me talk about all of them already. There were 2 reasons I did this again. And this is not just a repeat of something I've done 2.5 months ago. Number 1, we're post-draft, we're post the bulk of free agency. We know that the salary cap number, some things have changed in that regard. Mostly, many of these teams have done most of their dirty work this offseason. So nowadays, it's actually time, right? The prime focus is probably taking on contract extensions for these 10 players. But also, many of these positions have been completely reset, right? Mostly wide receivers here. We haven't had that big quarterback contract yet. But certainly with the wide receivers, guarantees, average salaries, 3-year cash, the works have been reset with a couple of contracts. Amon-Ra St. Brown and then A.J. Brown, of course, in Philadelphia, really taking the reins at the top of the list there. So here's the 5 quarterbacks identified. You know them all. Dak's at the top of this list. I don't know that we see a Dak Prescott extension. I've given you everything I can give you on this article. We know where things are headed. He has not lost any leverage. It sounds like the off the field stuff is going away and will not warrant any suspension from the league. So whatever stopgap that may have been for this whole process appears to have now been disintegrated. It isn't going away. They did a $5 million salary cap conversion to lower his cap hit a little bit. It's still going to be one of, if not the largest cap hit in the league for 2024, if they don't give him a new contract. And when they don't give him a new contract, he has a no tag and a no trade clause, which means he's going to free agency. All right. And once this current contract voids, Dallas is going to be stuck with $40.46 million. Yep. $40.46 million of dead cap for 2025. Not the worst number we've seen, right? We've got the Denver Broncos about to take on $53 million in 26 days here, but it's up there. And not only is there that a gigantic voided dead cap hit, but all three quarterbacks on this roster right now, all three, Cooper Rush, Trey Lance, Dak Prescott, all expiring contracts after 2024, which means they'll have almost $41 million of dead cap and zero quarterbacks on the roster heading towards March, when they'll have to start this thing over from scratch, or give Dak Prescott an extension with negative leverage at that point in time. I mean, when Dak's about to hit the open market, I don't know an agent in the world that would sign a contract before at least going around the league and getting an offer from the 15 or 16 teams who are going to be in the need for a quarterback at that point in time. And that's just life right now, right? Kirk Cousins had a torn Achilles, was 30-something years old, has been the absolute classic case of, is this guy a really good player or not? Has never had a near MVP season like Dak has never led a franchise to the postseason like Dak has. So you're going to let Dak Prescott get to the open market, and then you have the ability to bring him back on your price? No. Okay, he got fleeced when he needed the 4 for 160 back in 2021. And by the way, I got 4 other quarterback contracts on this in this article that are going to reset things even more so by the time next March gets here. So it's bad news for Dallas. And I'm a big Dak guy, and I like Dak on the Dallas Cowboys. I think it's good for football. But I think there's a very real possibility where over the next 6 to 8 months, we are walking ourselves toward a situation where Dak Prescott is going to hit the open market clean. This current contract voids, and he walks away to somebody else on a brand spanking new 4 to 5 year contract. So that's fun, because we just don't get to see that kind of stuff happen too often. But I believe we're headed in that direction, and I'm going to keep myself in that regard for now. What about the other quarterbacks? Tua, it sounds like it's close. I can't tell how close yet, because it's sort of tough to read where Miami has been. They've been adding pieces, right? They just added Odell Beckham Jr. over the weekend. We'll see what that looks like. It sounds like a 1 for 3 with tons of incentives, but they are still filling out this roster, which I imagine comes well before any kind of Tua extension. So Tua is in this conversation at $50 million per year. Jordan Love just became extension eligible on May 2nd. He had a clause in his bridge contract that he wasn't allowed to actually re-up before 1 year. May 2nd was that year. He's in the conversation for a $50 million extension, about 4 for 200. It's where we have him valued right now. Jared Goff on an expiring contract with the upswinging Detroit Lions. I'm not sure Jared Goff gets the $50 million, but he's 29. He's done everything this team has asked him to do. He has an FU mantra right now with the Rams situation and that trade in the first place. Detroit's going to have to take care of him, right? If I tell you he's a $40 million player mathematically, you probably have to get close to 50, if not at 50. So 48, something around there. Unless Goff wants to play ball a little bit here. And if he wants to play ball, and you start him on that 4 for 160, but guarantee the hell out of it. Now he's helping the team a little bit. He's going to get a bunch more cash in his pocket. Remember, this is contract number 3 for him. He got paid well after that Rams Super Bowl situation. We'll see how this goes. He's a $40 million player mathematically. I get why 50 probably has to become part of the conversation. Maybe he falls somewhere in the middle from a team-friendly standpoint. And Trevor Lawrence is the 5th quarterback. We talked about this. I don't think it has to happen. I don't think he's played himself into an absolute must-extend situation. But Jacksonville seems to be in that mindset. Every move they've made this offseason, including trying to retain Calvin Ridley at a big price before Tennessee blew it out of the water. Everything that they've done, said, at least tried to do out loud over the past few months screams, nothing about us is going backwards. We're going forwards. That would signify Trevor Lawrence getting a contract. I'm going to put him on a longer deal than I would Tua and Jordan Love and those kind of guys. He's 24, by the way, the youngest of this group. And we want to stretch some things out as much as possible. This would be a Philadelphia Eagles type contract, right? A not so big signing bonus, somewhere in the 20s to 30s, a somewhat similar second-year option bonus, a smaller third-year option bonus. So let's make this like an 8-year total contract, 6-year extension, so we can spread a bunch of this cap out and give Jacksonville some decisions on those option bonuses so that this isn't a lock and key, fully guaranteed 4-year contract like some of these other guys may be getting here. I just don't think Lawrence has given them a reason to say, this guy's definitely going to be our franchise quarterback for the next 4 seasons. Let's contractually make that work. I'd like to see Jacksonville get more term, more options, more outs. Wide receivers. I'm going to go in reverse order. T. Higgins is on this list, even though you've heard me say 1,000 times, here's 1,001. I don't believe Cincinnati wants to extend T. Higgins. And I don't believe T. Higgins wants anything to do with Cincinnati's offer, which probably hasn't come since December, because they knew where this was headed way back then. This is not a player that we want to give $75 million guaranteed to. Jamar Chase is on a low 4th year this year. T. Higgins, even at a franchise tag, plus that low Jamar Chase salary equals pretty decent value for 2 superstar wide receivers. Let's do that in 2024. I still think that's the case. If you believe he gets a multi-year extension, I've got it in the piece where I think he belongs, where the money says he belongs. Brandon Ayuk doesn't sound like he's going to be traded now. I'm not totally firmly believing that. Things change quickly. We'll see where, workouts go and things like that over the while, and teams get complacent for a bit. Once training camp ramps up a little bit, the June 1st stuff processes, right? Do the Bills have enough? Does Jacksonville have enough? Does Indy have enough? Et cetera. Does Pittsburgh have enough? All those teams are at least in the conversation for Brandon Ayuk still. But let's say he remains a 49er. Debo's contract, probably 1 more year than done. Maybe the same for George Kittle, who's getting up there. Maybe the same for Christian McCaffrey. We may be getting to a point now where Brandon Ayuk is currently the 4th option. And why would you pay the 4th option? But if they're reading their cards right, he may be the number 1 option by this time next year. His agents know it. He knows it. That's why he's saying what he's saying out loud. They may have to pay that. Will they do it this year? Or will they slap a tag on him, let some of those chips fall, right? Maybe they can get McCaffrey to re-up. Maybe they can keep Kittle on a pay cut. Maybe they can trade Debo, get somebody back to kind of replace him from a moniker standpoint. Again, options. My guess is they take a chance on Ayuk not holding out, let him play out 2024, tag him, and we go from there. So he may be trending toward a T. Higgins type situation, but he's in a healthier spot than Higgins right now. Let's put it that way. Jamar Chase, aforementioned. I don't think they want to do it yet, right? They want to stagger it a little bit away from the Burrow contract, but the next 3 guys are all 1B, and 1F, if that's fair, if you can follow that logic, right? It's certainly Justin Jefferson. But man, if you do any kind of deep dive on CeeDee Lamb's last 2 seasons, he's right there. Now, I don't believe that the eye test says that CeeDee Lamb is on Justin Jefferson's level. All right. I'm going to put Jefferson at the very top of this list. And I think financially speaking, he belongs there as well. So he's probably the last of all of these players to sign. Unless Minnesota separates themselves from the top, which is 32 a year, 84 guaranteed, 52.5 guaranteed at signing, 3-year cash of 80 million. Those are the top numbers that really agents and players should be caring about right now at this position. If Minnesota says, we don't want to wait for CeeDee Lamb's contract, we definitely don't want to wait for Jamar Chase's contract. Let's give him something that is exponentially greater than all those numbers I just gave you. Make him sign it and then make everybody else fall in underneath that, like what happened with Kansas City and Mahomes, like what happened with San Francisco and Nick Bosa, et cetera, et cetera. It's possible. Now, if they believe that CeeDee Lamb isn't going to sign this offseason because Dallas doesn't know what the hell they're doing right now, especially with Dak, that's probably what we get to. Jefferson may be the only player in this group, Jefferson, Lamb, Chase, Ayuk, Higgins, to actually get the contract. And it better be big, and it better be a massive separation from where we currently stand at this position, or I'm not signing it. And if I'm Justin Jefferson, I'm riding this thing out into 2025. I know there's a franchise tag coming. We'll deal with that however we need to deal with it. And we're just going to go out there and be Justin Jefferson on the field and let everything else do the talking. So it's funny how the hierarchy and maybe the order of operations here could go smoothly. What? A plus B plus C equals D. It could go, we could see absolutely nothing happen. And then maybe one of these players just has to settle for whatever is out there. Or we could see them all sign. And if we see them all sign, we're going to be talking about non-quarterback contracts at above, well north of 35 million a year, approaching 100 million guaranteed. And that's exciting stuff because we don't want a league where one position dominates financially and everybody else has to suffer because of it. So we've seen quarterbacks go up. We've seen cornerbacks go up. We've seen edge rushers sort of flounder a little bit. Everybody else, right? Guards, way up. Centers, way up. Tackles, doing well still. Everybody else is kind of getting their own right now. Good year for running backs. Great year for wide receivers. We'll see if that continues with some of these names. All available right now on Spotrac.com. The 5th-year option tracker, the recap, the 10 extension contracts. I've got calculated values, logical values, my thoughts, some analysis. Plenty more to go along with what's been said here as well. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Ginnitti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spotrac Podcast.